You finish a few emails. You tick off some small tasks. You feel like you've been productive. And then, somewhere around mid-afternoon, you sit down to do the thing that actually matters, and you can barely think.
Your focus feels thin, your motivation has gone quiet, and the strange part is, you haven't done anything particularly hard yet. Most people assume this is about sleep, or stress, or not drinking enough water,
And maybe those things play a role. But there's something else happening here, something that has nothing to do with your effort or your attitude. It has to do with how your brain actually tracks and processes work throughout the day. There's a very common piece of advice that gets passed around in productivity circles. It says, start with the easy stuff. Clear the small tasks first. Build momentum. Get some wins on the board. On the surface, this seems reasonable. It sounds logical, and it genuinely feels good in the short term. The problem is that your brain doesn't experience easy and small the same way that a to-do list does.
To your brain, every completed task requires something, not just time, not just attention, but a specific kind of mental resource that doesn't replenish simply because the task was quick. Research in cognitive psychology suggests that decision-making and task switching are among the most draining mental activities humans perform. Every time you complete something, shift your attention, and move to the next item, your brain is doing more than just changing topics. It's updating its internal state, releasing a small loop of tension, and then immediately preparing for the next one. This process costs something, even when the task itself was simple. There's a concept researchers have studied for years around what's sometimes called ego depletion. The idea that self-regulation, focus, and deliberate effort draw from a limited pool. While the science around this has been debated and refined, the broader finding remains consistent. The more decisions and task completions you process early in the day, the harder sustained, deep thinking becomes later. Think about a typical morning at a desk. You open your inbox. You reply to 3 quick messages. You confirm a meeting. You update a document. You respond to a request that only takes 2 minutes. None of these things feel difficult. Each one seems almost effortless. And yet, by the time you open the actual project that requires focused thinking, something feels different. The mental surface that you need to do real work on has already been disturbed. What makes this particularly confusing is the feeling of momentum that comes with clearing easy tasks. Each small completion creates a brief sense of satisfaction. Your brain registers closure. It releases a small reward signal. So in the moment, you feel like you're warming up, like you're getting ready. But neurologically, you're not warming up, you're spending. Consider what happens when someone sits down to do creative work, writing, problem solving, strategic thinking, after spending 2 hours on administrative tasks. The creative work requires a kind of mental stillness, an ability to hold multiple ideas in mind simultaneously, to tolerate uncertainty, to stay with something difficult without immediately resolving it. But the brain has already been trained by the morning to expect quick resolution. It has been closing loops all day. Open-ended thinking now feels uncomfortable in a way it might not have at the start of the day. This pattern shows up in research on decision fatigue as well. Studies involving people who make many small decisions throughout the day show a consistent decline in the quality of later decisions, not because the later decisions are harder, but because the volume of earlier decisions has worn down the system. The same logic applies to tasks. It isn't about difficulty, it's about frequency and accumulation. There's also something worth noting about the nature of switching. Every time you move from one task to another, your brain spends a small amount of effort reorienting. Psychologists call this a switching cost. When you clear 10 small tasks in the morning, you've also made at least 10 transitions. Each one is minor, but 10 minor transitions add up to something real. By the time you sit down for deep work, you've already accumulated a switch in debt that your concentration has to work against. This is the part that feels genuinely uncomfortable once you understand it. You weren't procrastinating. You weren't lazy. You were, by most visible measures, working. But the way you structured that work may have made your most important thinking harder before you ever got to it. There's also a quieter dimension to this. When easy tasks are completed first, they create the illusion of a productive day before the day's real demands have been met. This isn't a moral failure, it's a cognitive pattern. The brain prefers completed loops over open ones. Smaller tasks offer completion faster, so they pull you toward them naturally, especially when the bigger task feels uncertain or effortful. You aren't choosing small tasks because you're avoiding challenge consciously. You're choosing them because your brain is optimizing for the feeling of resolution. It's worth being clear about what this does not mean. This isn't a claim that easy tasks are bad, or that administrative work is unimportant, or that you should always begin your day with the hardest thing on your list regardless of context. Life doesn't work with that kind of consistency. Some days, the small tasks are the most urgent. Some mornings, clearing your inbox is genuinely necessary before anything else can move forward. Context matters enormously, and no single rule applies to every situation. What this also doesn't mean is that you've been doing something wrong. The behavior of starting with easy tasks is completely understandable given how the brain works. You are not fighting laziness. You're not failing at discipline. You are experiencing something that researchers have documented consistently across different environments and different types of people. Understanding it is not the same as needing to fix it immediately. What's worth sitting with is the gap between how productive a morning feels and how capable you feel when the important work arrives. That gap isn't random. It isn't a personality flaw. It's a function of how cognitive resources move through a day, how completion signals work in the brain, and how the structure of a morning shapes the quality of an afternoon. Most of us were never taught to think about mental energy as a resource that behaves differently depending on how it's spent, not just how much it's spent. We were taught that hard work is hard work, and that warming up with easier things is a sensible strategy. That idea comes from physical activity where it genuinely helps. But the brain doesn't follow the same logic as muscles preparing for exercise. There's something a little strange about realizing that feeling busy and feeling productive can lead you further from the work that actually required you the most. That the days where you clear everything small first can be the same days where the thing that mattered most gets done last, or half-heartedly, or not at all. Not because you didn't have time, but because by the time you arrived, the mental conditions for doing it well had already quietly changed. That's not a motivation problem. It's not a character problem. It's a pattern that becomes easier to see once you understand what's actually happening underneath the surface of your day.